General Braddock, may I present the great Delaware chief, Selinqua?
General, my people have lived, hunted on these lands from the beginning of time. Now we willingly share these lands with the English. We join you in driving French from these lands. We ask only, once the French are gone, that you grant us lands for hunting to feed our children.
Never.
The history books are full of intriguing stories from yesteryear, some of which happen to be cautionary dark tales from the American frontier. Life during these times was never taken for granted, and the prospect of daily life was treated the same then as does the modern-day alcoholic. One day at a time, one moment at a time. And for good reason. The next moment was never guaranteed.
Bloody assaults of cutthroat warfare, Indian raids, and environmental hazards. I'm sure ticks had something to do with a few deaths. Being only the strong survive, often a case of lineage extinction, encompassed the frontier.
Even Benjamin Franklin himself abandoned his fastening to pacifism to help to organize and train members of the 1st Pennsylvania regiments. But as not to embellish too much and stay on the straight and narrow, as we go through the Matrix's card catalog to find this tale from Pennsylvania's bloody history, it too is ultimately vicious and gruesome.
This is an old tale from the French and Indian War, remembered as
the Penn's Creek Massacre. The Penn's Creek Massacre was an October 16, 1755 raid by Lenape, or Delaware, Native Americans, on a settlement along Penn's Creek, a tributary of the Susquehanna River in central Pennsylvania. It was the first of a series of deadly raids on Pennsylvania settlements by Native Americans allied with the French in the French and Indian War. Of the 26 settlers they found living on Penn's Creek, the Lenape killed 14 and took 11 captive. One man was wounded, but managed to escape. 3 of the preteen girls who were taken captive regained their freedom after years of slavery, and their stories have been popularized in several young adult novels and a film called Alone, Yet Not Alone. The Lenape had been angered by years of European settlers encroaching on their land. They had just lost their traditional lands in the Lehigh Valley to the provincial government of Pennsylvania in a fraudulent deal known as the Walking Purchase, and many of them had subsequently moved into the Susquehanna Valley by permission of the Iroquois. 1 year before the Penn's Creek Massacre, the Iroquois had sold much of the Susquehanna Valley to the governments of Pennsylvania and Connecticut without consulting the Lenape, who once again found themselves being displaced by arriving settlers. As a direct result of Penn's Creek Massacre and subsequent raids, Pennsylvania Assemblyman Benjamin Franklin persuaded the governor and assembly of the province to abandon its roots in Quaker pacifism and establish an armed military force and a chain of forts to protect the settlements.
And yes, Franklin himself helped to organize and train the 1st Pennsylvania regiments.
The Lenape and other displaced Native Americans continued their attacks on settlers and battles with the provincial forces for 3 years until the Treaty of Easton was signed between the tribes and the British in 1758. During the French and Indian War, although the Iroquois refused to take sides for the first 4 years of the conflict and instructed all of the tribes under their protection to do the same, the Lenape and the Shawnee broke ranks and joined northern tribes, the Huron, Ottawa, and Ojibwe, in forging an alliance with the French.
On July 9, 1755, the French and their Native American allies decisively defeated a combined force of colonial and British soldiers led by General Edward Braddock at the Battle of Monongahela in Braddock's Field, Pennsylvania, 10 miles east of Pittsburgh.
3 months later, a French and Native American army of about 1,500 men prepared to march east in order to secure the Susquehanna River as a supply line. They sent ahead of them several advanced parties of Lenape. It was one of these Lenape advanced parties which came upon the settlements at Penn Creek, located on the west branch of the Susquehanna River, in the morning hours of October 16th, 1755. Before dawn on October 16th, a group of 8 Lenape warriors attacked the settlement of Penn's Creek.
After firing several shots, the Lenape first attacked the Swiss farmer Jean-Jacques Leroy before setting his house on fire. His body was later found partially burned, with 2 tomahawks still buried in his forehead. A spring that emerges from the ground near the site where his body was discovered is today known as Leroy's Spring, and the tiny stream that flows from it into Penn's Creek is known as Swicer's Run. Leroy's son, also named Jean-Jacques and called Jacob, fought with his father's killers but was overpowered and taken captive, along with his 12-year-old sister Marie and another young girl who was living in the house, Mary Ann Viers. When a neighbor of Leroy's by the name of Bastian rode up on horseback, he was shot and then scalped.
2 of the Lenape then traveled to the Leninger household, approximately a half-mile away. There they demanded rum, but none was in the house, so they were given tobacco instead. After they smoked a pipe, they stated, "We are Allegheny Indians and your enemies. You must all die!" They shot Sebastian Leninger and tomahawked his 20-year-old son before taking his daughters, 12-year-old Barbara and 9-year-old Regina, captive. Leninger's wife and another son were away at a mill and were thus spared. Several of the Lenape took the prisoners as well as the horses and provisions they had plundered from the Leroy and Leninger households into the forest, where they joined the rest of the Lenape warriors, who brought with them 6 scalps and stated that they had a good hunt that day. Later, some of the Lenape went back into the settlement and resumed killing, returning in the evening with 9 more scalps and 5 more prisoners. Hannah Braylinger's husband, Jacob, had been killed, and she and her 2 children taken captive.
A settler named Peter Lick was also taken along with his 2 sons, John and William. Of the 14 settlers murdered at Penn's Creek, 13 were men and elderly women, and 1 was a 2-week-old infant. 1 unidentified man was wounded but escaped and made his way to a nearby settlement to report what happened.
As history unfolds, the atrocities we have bestowed upon one another come to light as quite ludicrous and vile. Maybe in context, life in the wilderness, it was necessary for some of these heinous actions to transpire, some of which my spoon-fed opinionated perspective can't really absorb to its full potential, only knowing to model and indulge in the adept practices and the fancy pleasantries of modern-day innovations. To put into words, I don't know what it would be like to be in that situation, would probably be the best sentiment to say. You could only know if you walked a mile in these frontiersmen's shoes.
Thank you guys for checking out the channel. If you like this video and videos like this, please be sure to stop on by and check out more videos where we explore the American frontier. Try to release videos weekly. And as always, get out there and explore. Thanks, guys.